Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at Kebab's ToothPick, the TP3. I built mine with the Beta FPV 12 amp flight controller and ESC all-in-one board, Eachine Nano VTX, Runcam Nano 3 camera, Newbie drone canopy, FPV Cycle 1303 5000 kV motors, and the Gemfan 3016 props. The arm thickness looks to be about 2.5 millimeters thick and about 3.5 millimeters wide. And I'm getting 122 millimeters motor post to motor post. Frame kit also comes with an extra arm and extra rubber bands to secure your battery, and some extra screws which have long been put away. Mine weighs about 56.25 grams. I flew it on these G&B 520 milliamp 3S batteries, which brings our flight weight up to just about 99 grams. We're going to start off with a 3S flight because that's the most fun, exhilarating. That's what I like to do. Not a particularly nice day. It's pretty gloomy out. I think if I recall this period of time, the weather was in the 50s, maybe even popped up into the 60s a little bit, but we didn't get a lot of sunshine, but at least it was dry because recently it hasn't been dry. But I've been flying inside from time to time and enjoying myself with this stay-at-home period here as we all get through this together. We'll hopefully get past this fairly soon. We got quite a ways we can talk because this is a really efficient setup. And many of you have TP3s. You have ToothPicks. You probably have previous iterations as well. And share your thoughts on your experiences, maybe combinations that you've tried, motors that aren't from FPV Cycle, because just like the frame, the motors are hard to get as well. You can use pretty much any component you want as far as the VTX and ESC goes. You know, it's a little bit overkill probably to buy a 20 amp Beta FPV ESC. But I would keep the weight down because that is what gives it a lot of its efficiency. Of course, we've got a low pitch prop and we've got very efficient and smooth motors. If you didn't notice in the quick roll, my motors did get a little bit dinged up from crashes. Didn't necessarily indicate soft metal, just something I would note. So this flight is going to go on for nearly 5 minutes. I could have used a little bit more camera angle, but I see this as a little bit more of a freestyle sort of, you know, just go out and run around and have some fun sort of quad. I wouldn't call it a burner. But I shouldn't necessarily claim it's not a burner because my camera angle, if I push that camera angle back, that'll force the nose down more in flight and I'll naturally pick up more speed. I do wish this motor prop combination had a little bit more torque on the bottom end. I kind of felt like I couldn't make things snap real hard. I had to be pretty smooth on the lines. I couldn't make hard, quick corrections. But because of the weight, it is very efficient. It does fly very well, and it's also a lot of fun. You know, there's not much to this. The frame arms kind of interlock. I shouldn't say interlock so much. They kind of come together at the bottom, and then there's a screw you put through the bottom to kind of squeeze them all together to make sure the arms stay together. And you can get replaceable arms, and the kit comes with the one that I mentioned in the quick roll. The rubber band that we use for battery straps, that's fine. Eventually it's going to break either through crashes or drying out and just snapping on its own, but you do get several others in the kit as well. I used a little bit of the super cheap UAV battery mat on mine just because I had some. I'm actually getting kind of low on both Grip and that cheap stuff, so I'm going to have to restock here pretty soon. For those that are curious with the build, you're looking about 18 bucks for the frame, about $52 for the motors. The all-in-one board's going to run you about 45 bucks. The camera runs about $19 or $20. The VTX, depending upon which one you get, you might spend 14 bucks. You might spend 20 bucks. It really depends on what you want to do. You've got the Rush Mini Tank if it's out there. I think that tends to run a little over $20. I've got two of those that I've used. I've used these Eachine Nanos so often now. I've kind of lost track of how many. I did have one or two that gave me fits. One that the smart audio function didn't work, and that was not on Betaflight 4. That was on Betaflight 357, so I was pretty certain about what I was doing there. But it just wouldn't switch channels, and eventually, after a number of flights, that one did give up. I had one other that was either DOA out of the package, or it just didn't have very good signal. I can't remember what the issue was, but I couldn't tell you how many of these things I've used. And because when I'm doing custom builds on the VTX side, unless I'm testing a VTX, I will use stuff that I think is fairly inexpensive that gives me good video reception. And the Eachine Nano is one of those that I think is pretty good. You saw that glitch right there. I did try to resync our flight audio. For those not familiar with the channel, the flight audio comes from a camera that I have sitting on the table in front of me, and then I do a little clap like they do in the movies, and then I sync that flight audio to our DVR, and then I throw on a little background to make the picture look a little bit better or easier to view. Hopefully you've kind of taken this in and typed out, if you're an owner of a TP3 or another ToothPick iteration, of combinations that you've tried and things that you've enjoyed. We're also going to look at a 2S flight coming up. It's just going to be kind of a sample. The 2S flight, I'm running on a 520 milliamp 2S battery, also a G&B, and the flight time was actually a little bit less than we see here. It's about 4 minutes and 20 seconds, just to give you that information. It's pretty docile on 2S. I think some people would still enjoy it, but I'll let you judge for yourself as we get to that 2S flight here in a few seconds, because we're going to make a final long pass along the back, a couple more winding turns, and then we're going to come in for a landing here at about 5 minutes on our flight time. We'll pop back to the battery viewing screen in order to be able to see our final voltage, and we can see that the batteries end up just below 3.5 volts per cell. So I went a touch long on that particular flight. This is our 2S flight, and if you notice there, we had a cell voltage just below full charge, because I actually just did a test hover on 2S just to kind of see what it was going to like, see if I was going to have to retune it, and I didn't retune it. I actually did the 3S flight first, and then I came back to 2S. 2S is a little bit soft, you know, it's a little bit less powerful, but if you're not looking for big punches, or you're not looking for, you know, top performance, and you've got 2S batteries, you know, a good build, it's still going to be good fun. It flies well. You really won't have to spend too much time tuning this. I thought it was really easy to tune, and I think that's one of the things that Bob always strives for, is a combination that's really easy to tune, because if I remember chatting with him, he does not like to tune. So that's one of his requirements, I think. I could be wrong. Correct me on that if you know, or if Bob comes by and I got that all twisted, let me know. I don't want to be telling tales out of school. You may have noticed in the quick roll my canopy from Newbie Drone, that's actually trimmed the camera protection on that a little bit to where I can protect the camera with that canopy. And it is one of my favorite canopies, the Newbie Drone. I can't remember what they call it. It's not the Goober. The Goober is the one for our whoops, but this one's called something else. Bob sells it on his site. You'll find it all over the place as well. I'll put links to a build if you want to build one like this. If you have, again, if you have a motor prop combination that you prefer that's different, or one that you've experienced that you enjoyed, please leave those down in the video description. You don't have to type it more than once, because if you use links to parts, YouTube thinks that just about any link that comes from the comments is spam, and I'll look at it and approve it later. So, you know, if you're typing out your comment and you hit the submit button and you find that it doesn't appear, don't worry about it. I'll approve it here in a short time. That's just a little sample of the flight. We got to see it kind of wind in and out of the trees. We got to see it punch out both ways over the house. I think we're good there. Again, the flight comes in at about 4 minutes and 27 seconds. So I mentioned in the flight how the arms kind of come together and they interlock, and there's a screw right there. I think that screw is fairly important, especially if you're one that tends to bash around a little bit, because that's going to ensure your arms don't have any movement. I always worry about arm movement and not having everything firm to where that movement allows for a snapping point. Also, if you're not familiar, again, these are crazy popular, so many times I feel like I'm saying something that 99% of you that are watching the video already know, but I never know who's going to watch the video. And if you're not familiar with the ToothPick, we get a look at the bottom here. We see that we just have 2 motor screws, and these are 2mm shafts, so you need to make sure you get props that are 2mm so you can just push them on. I think I also called out in the quick roll I had a few dings on my motors. There's one over there if I can get the light just right. I thought this one had one as well. I went headlong into a tree. There's a little bit of a nick down there. You can feel it's kind of rough on my finger. I went headlong into a tree and hit, and it just didn't have any impact on this whatsoever. I did trim my canopy lens protection back, but I think I did too much. But of course, if you make contact going forward, I still have this protruding edge, and our weight should be low enough for, hopefully, at least in my cases, my crashes, I didn't have to refocus my camera. Many people get these cameras and think they can't be refocused. Get yourself a pair of needle nose, and very lightly, usually if your camera becomes unfocused, the glue is already knocked loose, or otherwise it wouldn't have. But there could be an edge. If you see any glue around the edge, use some sort of knife or something to scrape it out gently, and then turn the machine on, or get the camera in your hand so you can hold it still. grab the lens with the needle nose and slightly turn it. Don't get your gorilla hands out and squeeze that thing off. You got to be gentle. It's finesse. We're trying to get it back into focus. So watch your goggles or watch a screen, whatever you might have, and then slowly turn that to where it goes back into focus. You can use some focus paper if you care to, or you can just look at off in the distance at something that's 10 to 12 to 15 or whatever focal distance you want away. Something that is important about these things is to use these lock nuts on the bottom. That keeps the screw nice and sturdy all the way up through the mount of the newbie drone. And these newbie drone, one of the reasons why I like these is that their particular chemicals and plastic that they use is really hardy. I have yet to break one of these. I don't know how many times I've used them. I've got a couple that haven't even appeared on the channel. There's one I see over there and another one over there that I don't even know if will come to the channel. So maybe 8 or 9 times I've used this canopy on outdoor quads, and they have never failed me. They grab the screws real nice and tight too, so they're not hard to get in, but they don't also come easily off the screw. Like when I had that frontal impact that probably hit the camera, didn't even move the canopy up the screw at all. I depenned an FrSky RXSR receiver so that I could get that in there nice and easy and smooth. Easy peasy there. I used a little bit of welder back here on my antenna. This canopy, if you can tell right in there, has a little bit of a grabbing point for our antenna. I did use a lighter antenna than what comes with the VTX. This is a little bit of a thinner coax, so you may or may not want to use that. But this goes in this canopy or this antenna catch pretty easy. And then I used some welder and just kind of globbed it on the back to make sure it stays in there nice and tidy. I did not use any screws above the flight controller, if you can see that cleanly there. I didn't feel that there was a need. I thought everything stayed together and hunkered down pretty well. Of course, I've got my battery lead secured down via one of the wires I'm also mounting my antennas from, and then I have a little bit of clear heat shrink that also is securing those antenna from my RXSR down. The kit, if you choose to build one, comes in around 150 bucks, depending upon shipping, taxes, things of that nature. And sometimes I'll have people ask me, why would I ever build something like this when I can buy something so much less? Well, one, there's fun in building. So many people enjoy building, and I'm one of those. I wish I had more time to build. Actually, lately I have had more time to build. So I have done a few builds I have laying up here. Again, they're just, I took random parts and frames that I had and I just kind of built something up so I can tinker with it. I only think I have one that I might bring to the channel, which would be this one over here. I think this is the Apex Racing frame. I think it's also based upon an iteration of Bob's frame. I actually got this in my Pyro Drone box, but I didn't order them. So I'm a little bit confused about if it is the Apex Racing ToothPick version. I'm just not certain of that. I looked online. I think the motor hole pattern is different on the Pyro Drone website than this, but maybe the iteration or the picture has been updated. I don't recall ordering this, but they sent me 3, so I thought I would build one in my spare time. And you see on that canopy, I did a little better job of clipping the ends off a little bit outside of the camera. I took a little steady approach to that, and I actually clipped the lower one and then would see if it still appeared in the screen. If it didn't, then I left it, and then I moved to the other lower one and clipped it, and then I just kind of guessed where I could go up top. But this might come to the channel. I don't know. I'm tinkering around with motors on this, wanting to make another 2S flyer that I can have some fun with. The combination of the prop frame and motors is a crazy efficient and long flight time combination. I know that flight time is king with many of you, and if you want that extra flight time, I think it's going to be really hard to get an RTF that has this sort of flight time at 5 minutes. I don't think I've gotten anywhere close to 5 minutes when I'm flying my normal ways, so that's something to keep into consideration, a build versus an RTF. If you just don't want to build and you don't trust yourself, then that's fine. Eventually, you're going to need to at least repair, but if you don't care for that sort of thing, I don't have a recommendation for you what you would get that would perform like this with that sort of efficiency. We've seen a few things come through, like the Ishi Novice, which is kind of close-ish. Maybe close-ish is even not all that accurate, but you can go watch that review. You can cruise through the channel and decide what you think of this versus that or anything else you see on the channel. Oh, I should bring one other thing about this battery lead, you know, you see I have my battery mat. Actually misspoke. I thought I used the URUAV battery mat down here. I didn't. I just clipped off probably a piece of battery mat that was laying on the desk. But you have this T-style out here, and then it's kind of V-shaped up here. I leave the rubber band in there and then just kind of work it in. You might want to disconnect it, but I would leave the front, especially with that screw right there. You're going to want to put that rubber band in before you get everything sorted out, especially with that screw, because with that thick rubber band, it gets to be a little bit of a pain to get that rubber band threaded through there. You can do it. I had to do it, but if you want to remove the rubber band to mount and unmount your battery, I would remove it from the T shape in the back. There is a little bit of a risk with something like this, and not necessarily specific to this, but on a kind of the all ToothPick build sort of things where you have your flight controller it's kind of exposed. You know, if you were to tumble through a tree and hit something on the board like that little guy there and knock it off the board, that's something that doesn't happen with something that's more traditional. Now, there is a possibility you get a stick in through the side and the same thing could sort of happen, but at least it's not as exposed. So that's something, especially for newer pilots, you might take into consideration of building something like this, at least with this canopy. You can get a TPU print canopy like this twig canopy. You actually can't print this yourself, but you can buy one, or you can find pickle pods, I think are what they're called, and print your own sort of canopy. This will give you a little bit more protection than this canopy here, but I think this does weigh slightly more, and I prefer this just because it holds the camera rock steady and it's very, very durable. I haven't had durability with this, but I have had issues where sometimes if I don't have things mounted up right, I'll get a little bit of jello in these sort of mounts. So just something I wanted to throw out there with newer pilots, newer builders, that this does have a little bit more risk. You can get a twig or something as you're falling through a tree, loop one of those wires and jerk the pad right off the board. You know, any number of things could possibly happen. Now, would it happen? You know, I had that tree crash straight onto the tree, and then I had a random failsafe. Let's look at that failsafe. This was really bizarre. I couldn't tell you how many times I flew it, but as I do the punch out over the house, it just kind of goes into free fall, and you can see there on the OSD, because I have the warnings on, it says RX loss, and then I just kind of fall to the ground. I go over and pick it up, and everything is fine, and just go off and fly it more. That happened one time. I don't know if it was some black magic or a solar flare or what was going on, but it did have a random fail-safe in a place that I've flown thousands of times. The tree crash, well, let's go ahead and show the tree crash. It was a pretty dramatic crash in my opinion. I'm just kind of flying around the backyard. I don't know what, you know, it's one of those moments where when you watch the footage back, you think you just, it looks like somebody who doesn't know how to fly. Or it looks like somebody who the target, who's flying, and the target is actually the tree. It's kind of ridiculous, but I smoked that tree pretty good. Again, no damage to the frame or any of the components. I thought one of the arms, oh yeah, here it is. Let's go back to the frame here a little bit. I have a little bit of a delamination and this edge is coming off. I don't know when that happened for certain. Been on a lot of different flights with this over the course of the last, I don't know, 6-8 weeks. I can't remember how long I've had this, but that's the only frame damage that I see that I've had on it. I guess the front one, you might not be able to pick it up on camera. Maybe if I can get the light on there just right. Maybe if I can get my camera to focus as well. Can you see that edge? How it's just a little bit of a different color. Looks like that bottom layer of that very, very outer tip came off. And get a little better shot of this here as well. That's the only damage I had to report in all my bashing and crashing and just flying and having fun. So I'm not concerned about the carbon quality or anything of that nature. The only thing I wanted to bring to light was if you're building and you're new to building and you maybe are a little less experienced in flying, that, you know, if you fall through a tree or you do something you don't want to, there is some additional risk in having the board as exposed as it is. A lot of fun. I think everybody should have one because of that long flight time and good performance, although I would want a little bit more torque on the bottom end, but I still want to maintain a 4-minute flight. So I would give up a little bit of flight time to get a little bit more quick prop response on the bottom end. But I think you should buy one if you can. You might be able to find someone, like, if you don't like to build, I'll pitch you on getting in contact with Adam Baum or Adam Douglas. Adam Baum Build and Repair Services on Facebook. He does all sorts of builds and repairs for very for many people. Many of you out there have commissioned builds from him. I've commissioned builds from him. Many of you have used his repair services. He's someone that I know that you can get in contact with. Again, Adam Baum Build and Repair Services on Facebook, and send him a message on his Facebook page, and he'll get you sorted out. He does things extremely economically. Getting a toothpick, that's kind of a challenge because it took me a couple months. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.